Good morning, it's June 8th, 2026, and welcome to the Stylo News Intelligence Update. I'm your host, and today we're bringing you a focused, objective explainer on the rapidly escalating events across South America. We'll be breaking down the primary patterns of instability, shifting political landscapes, and the very real impacts these developments are having, from local streets all the way up to international diplomatic corridors. Let's get right to the facts.
Now, before we dive in, this morning's brief is powered by ProWave AI. They're the developers behind the Stylo Intel Ops platform, which is an advanced AI-powered open-source intelligence program, as well as Stylo News, the commercial version you can access directly on the web and through their mobile apps.
All right, here's our roadmap for today's briefing. We're covering 5 critical areas: regional hotspots and overview, elections and diplomatic tensions, security and cartel operations, leadership and public sentiment, and finally, forecast and upcoming events. Let's start with Section 1, Regional Hotspots and Overview. We are mapping the instability.
Starting up in northern South America, take a look at these strategic corridors stretching from the Caribbean coast straight down through the Andes. The areas you're seeing highlighted represent a massive, complex intersection of geography, politics, and illicit trade. We are actively tracking a continuous band of volatility that crosses multiple borders. So we really can't look at these nations in isolation. It's a deeply connected system of regional pressure points.
So what's actually driving this macro-level instability? Well, it varies by country. Colombia is currently facing a hybrid threat environment. That means they're simultaneously battling remaining insurgents, narco-traffickers, and intense election polarization. Over in Ecuador, the state is locked in direct, military-backed operations against deeply entrenched cartel violence. Moving to Bolivia, the issue is severe political and economic unrest, which has led to nationwide blockades. And down in Brazil, organized crime syndicates have grown to a scale where international partners are officially designating them as strategic threats. Moving on to Section 2, Elections and Diplomatic Tensions. Let's focus on the Colombian crisis.
We're seeing some fundamentally opposed perspectives from key decision-makers right now. On one side, Colombian President Gustavo Petro, the country's first leftist president, has publicly accused the U.S. government of interfering in their upcoming election by supporting political actors linked to paramilitary groups and drug traffickers. On the flip side, former U.S. President Donald Trump has issued a very strong public endorsement for the hard-right Colombian candidate Abelardo de la Esprilla, specifically praising his strict law and order policies. These diametrically opposed views really highlight the extreme political polarization currently gripping the nation.
And these political divides have very tangible consequences across the board. At the local level, major urban centers are facing real threats of election-related civil disorder because of this polarization. Nationally, this is a watershed moment. The election outcome is going to fundamentally redefine how Colombia handles internal security and its long-standing drug war. And internationally, those open allegations of U.S. interference are severely straining bilateral relations, which directly impacts the multinational cooperation needed to fight transnational narcotics networks.
Let's pivot to Section 3, Security and Cartel Operations. These are the kinetic developments. Looking at the operational realities on the ground, the marked zones show us where kinetic, or active physical combat operations are most intense. This is particularly true along the eastern Pacific maritime corridors used for cocaine smuggling. We're actually seeing active U.S. military strikes on suspected drug boats in these waters right now. That serves as a near real-time indicator of just how active and heavily contested these transit routes really are.
And the human cost here is severe. Let's look at the data derived from recent intelligence estimates. In Ecuador, violent conflicts between rival cartels, like Los Lobos and Los Choneros, contributed to over 1,600 violent deaths in early 2026 alone. Over in Brazil, networks like the PCC and Comando Vermelho have grown to such a massive transnational scale that they've triggered those official U.S. strategic threat designations we discussed. Meanwhile, in Colombia, FARC dissident factions and ELN elements are keeping up active operations in contested rural zones like Nariño and Puchamayo. Now, while cartels drive the direct violence, we've also got to keep an eye on indirect vulnerabilities. Take Bolivia. The severe civil unrest and blockades in La Paz are primarily political and economic, but they're heavily tying down state security forces. When military and police resources are stretched thin just trying to manage internal unrest, it creates immediate vulnerabilities along border regions. And you can bet illicit trafficking networks are quick to exploit those openings. If we summarize this security crisis, we see another multi-level impact structure. Locally, rural communities are the ones enduring violence, blockades, and targeted assassinations.
Nationally, sovereign governments are being forced to deploy their militaries simply to maintain internal policing and basic territorial control. And internationally, this localized violence is the engine funding a massive global cocaine trade, a trade that's now heavily impacting security and demanding unified multilateral responses as far away as Europe. This brings us to Section 4, Leadership and Public Sentiment. We're looking at open source intelligence. To understand where these crises might lead, we need to analyze public response. When our AI tools process social media sentiment from platforms like X, a really clear ideological divide pops up. The conversation is largely split between users who are highly critical of foreign intervention and those who strongly support direct military results against cartels. We also see a smaller, neutral segment that's focused purely on observational reporting. Diving a bit deeper into those numbers, the negative sentiment is often characterized by strong criticism of perceived U.S. interference. Users are actively alleging a U.S.-backed alignment of right-wing leaders in the region, referring to a cocaine triangle. Conversely, the positive sentiment is very results-oriented. We're seeing favorable reactions to concrete military successes, like the recent 550-kilogram cocaine seizure conducted jointly by the U.S. Southern Command and Colombian forces. Meanwhile, that neutral, observational discourse tends to focus on broader regional issues, like the severe drought impacts and alarming biodiversity loss we're tracking in Venezuela. And this public polarization, it's mirrored right at the top by regional leadership. For example, Peruvian political leader Roberto Sanchez has been actively seeking integration with leftist Latin American leaders, openly citing Bolivia's political structure as a model for Peru. When leaders actively seek out ideological alliances across borders like this, it makes forming a unified multinational response to these security threats incredibly complicated. Finally, let's look at Section 5, Forecast and Upcoming Events. What's on the horizon? Here is your key watch list for June 2026. Mark your calendars for June 11th because Mexico City will host the opening match of the FIFA World Cup, pitting Mexico against South Africa. That's going to draw massive international attention and economic activity to the region. Just 10 days later, on June 21st, Colombia holds its highly polarized presidential runoff election, an event with massive implications for regional security. And ongoing throughout the month, we're closely monitoring the U.S. Pentagon's review of those Caribbean drug boat strikes, which could definitely lead to evolving force protection postures in the hemisphere. Now, this concludes our morning visual explainer, but the analysis definitely doesn't stop here. This short program serves as a lead-in to queue you up for our comprehensive morning podcast titled Cartels, Elections, and Border Battles Across South America. Released today, June 8th, 2026, the full podcast gives you a deep dive analysis into 2 weeks of critical events across the region. You can listen to it right now on your favorite podcast channel or simply by following the link attached to this post. Thank you for joining me for this intelligence update. As South America prepares for the global spotlight of the World Cup amidst unprecedented security challenges, one critical question remains. Will multinational diplomacy be able to outpace the rapid growth of transnational syndicates? To track this and get AI-powered news on demand, be sure to subscribe to Stylo News at www.stylonews.com. I'm your host, wishing you a clear, factual, and informed day. We'll see you next time.